That red dress used to mean something. It was a quiet promise she once made to her heart on the night Julian first looked at her, with eyes that made everything else disappear. Now standing before the full-length mirror in a cold, dimly lit bedroom, Evelyn Hart stared at the reflection staring back. Soft curls framed her face, bold red lipstick perfectly painted, her silhouette still effortlessly elegant. But the eyes were different. They no longer waited. They no longer pleaded. They were made of glass now, cold, clear, sharp enough to cut through any lie. Tonight marked their third wedding anniversary. The penthouse apartment in Manhattan was wrapped in silence. Candles on the dining table had burned down low. The glass of wine she had poured hours ago remained untouched. The dinner, ordered from the French restaurant Julian once adored, sat untouched, gone cold. He hadn't come home. No message, no call. She knew exactly where he was. Eric had sent the photos. Julian, her husband, was out dining with a woman nearly a decade younger than Evelyn, at the same restaurant where they once celebrated her first birthday together as newlyweds. Evelyn didn't cry. She simply sat down, unclasped her earrings, and placed them carefully on the table, as if performing a final ritual to mark the end. "Hope isn't always a gift," she whispered, her fingers trailing across the lace of her dress. "Sometimes it's the cruelest lie." Her eyes shifted to the sparkling skyline beyond the tall glass windows. Tonight, Evelyn Hart was done waiting. The red dress was back in the closet. Evelyn changed into a long silk robe, her hair, once pinned high, now cascaded softly over her shoulders. She sat in the armchair, holding a half-warm glass of wine, her eyes fixed on the clock. 10:56 p.m., almost midnight, no message, no explanation. Then the door flung open. Julian stepped in like a storm, trailing the scent of expensive liquor, unfamiliar perfume, and that cold, arrogant air Evelyn had come to know far too well. "You're still up?" he asked, his tone lazy, as if her waiting meant nothing. Evelyn said nothing, she just looked at him. Julian loosened his tie, tossing his coat over a chair. She saw the faint trace of lipstick on his white collar. "Do you know what today is?" she asked softly, like her voice might shatter if it were any louder. He paused for half a second, then shrugged. "Long day at the office. Don't start this again." Evelyn let out a dry laugh, short, bitter, hollow. "I'm not starting anything. I just thought you might remember. I planned everything. Dinner from your favorite restaurant, candles, red wine." She gestured toward the dining table. Untouched plates, wilted candle wax, a scene abandoned. Julian glanced, then looked away. "You didn't have to do all that," he muttered. "All that," Evelyn repeated, her voice sharper now. "It's our anniversary, Julian. Not a surprise party." He sighed, walked to the kitchen, and poured himself a glass of whiskey, like she wasn't even there. "I can't keep doing this, Julian." "Then don't," he said, turning back with a blank stare. "If you're tired, end it." The words hit like wind, weightless to him, but crashing through her ribcage like thunder. Evelyn didn't scream, didn't argue. She simply nodded, rose to her feet, and walked slowly toward the bedroom. When she closed the door behind her, she didn't cry. She just stood in the dark, arms wrapped around herself, whispering silently, "It's already over. I just haven't said it out loud yet." The next morning, sunlight seeped through the curtains, gentle but cold. Evelyn hadn't slept. She simply lay there, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling as if searching for whatever fragments remained of her marriage. Julian had left early. She'd heard the front door close around 6 a.m. No goodbye, no apology for the night before. Evelyn walked into the living room. The dining table still bore the ruins of last night. She cleaned it in silence. Not out of forgiveness, but because she refused to live in the mess someone else made. As she reached for Julian's coat to toss it into the laundry room, a small piece of paper fell from the pocket. A receipt. Le Jardin, party of 2:09:40 p.m., $648. The date matched their wedding anniversary. Exactly. Her fingers curled around the paper. The veins in her hands stood out, but she didn't cry. Instead, she pressed her lips together and took a long breath. She'd become too used to patching herself back together. She checked the other pocket, found a small blue box. Tiffany & Co. inside, a pair of earrings, oversized, flashy, the kind a man buys when he's not paying attention to who he's hurting. She picked up her phone and skimmed through old messages. A hidden thread from an unsaved number appeared. "Last night was unreal. Can't wait to see you again." Sent at 2:13 a.m. Julian hadn't deleted it. He'd only tucked it away. It felt like a thin sheet of frost coated her heart. But instead of going numb, Evelyn felt sharper than ever. She called Maya Lynn, her best friend since college, now one of New York's top divorce attorneys. "I don't want to give up too soon, but I won't be lied to again." "Then start with the truth," Maya said. "Let me connect you with someone." 3 days later, Evelyn met Eric Malone, former FBI, now private investigator. He didn't ask many questions. One look into Evelyn's eyes told him what he needed. This wasn't a woman chasing emotions. She was hunting facts. "I want everything," Evelyn said, eyes steady. "Names, locations, photos, expenses. I want to know exactly how many lies I've lived with." Eric nodded. "You'll have it." That night, Evelyn sat alone on the sofa, replaying all the signs she had once ignored. Phone calls that ended the second she entered the room, screens always face down, work schedules that never aligned, late-night meetings that reeked of alcohol and unfamiliar perfume. No, Evelyn hadn't been stupid. She had simply loved hard enough to choose trust. Now she was choosing truth. 3 days after handing everything over to Eric Malone, Evelyn returned to the office with a mask of near-perfect composure. Her smile was polished, her posture sharp. But inside, a quiet storm churned. And then someone noticed it, all of it, in a single glance. Monday mornings at the firm were always a blur, heels clicking, phones ringing, keyboards tapping. But Evelyn moved through it all like she was underwater. She arrived early, makeup flawless, wearing a fitted black suit. No one would see the sleepless night or the fractured heart. But her eyes, they couldn't lie. Nathan Cole, the company's CEO, caught sight of her in the elevator. He said nothing at first, just a nod. But his gaze lingered a little longer than usual. An hour later, his assistant emailed her, "Mr. Cole would like to see you privately if you're available late morning." Evelyn stepped into the office on the 42nd floor, surrounded by glass, with a view that swallowed Manhattan whole. Nathan stood by the window, hands in his pockets, expression distant. "You look tired," he said as she sat. "I'm working fine," she replied, steady voice, practiced calm. "I know, but sometimes people function perfectly while falling apart inside." Evelyn looked up. For the first time, she wasn't met with pity, but with something rarer, genuine concern. No advice, no assumptions, just someone who saw someone else breaking and quietly reached out. "I think," she began slowly, "I'm losing my marriage." Nathan didn't ask why. He didn't need the details. He just looked at her, and it said enough. "I believe you. I see you. The thing is," Evelyn's gaze shifted to the skyline. "I've tried to hold on. I've tried to trust. But at some point you have to ask yourself, if I'm the only one fighting for this, is it even a marriage anymore?" Silence settled in the room, as if the city itself had paused to listen. Nathan walked over, poured her a glass of water, and set it gently in front of her. No words, no pressure, just a quiet gesture, but so human, so real. Evelyn took the glass. Her heart stirred, not because he was her boss, not because he was striking, but because for the first time in months, someone truly saw her. "Don't lose yourself trying to hold on to someone who's already let go," Nathan said, voice low and sure, "because in the end, it's just you living with yourself." Evelyn didn't reply, but when she left his office, her eyes, for the first time in weeks, weren't clouded by despair. Ever since that quiet, unsettling conversation with Nathan, Evelyn had come to realize sometimes a silent glance carried more weight than 1,000 words. And as the company's annual gala approached, she no longer hoped Julian would stand beside her. She only wanted to show up as herself. Cole Media's annual gala wasn't just an event, it was a stage. Power, wealth, subtle wars in tuxedos and ball gowns, deals sealed in glances, reputations cemented in silence. Evelyn stood in front of her vanity, slipping into a black off-shoulder gown, simple yet sharp. A thin silver necklace rested above her collarbone. Her makeup was soft but precise, her lips the color of dark wine. You wouldn't know she'd spent the night before scrolling through photos of Julian, hand in hand with another woman. Julian said he'd come, but 15 minutes before the car arrived, he texted her, "Go without me. Something came up." No apology, no explanation. Nothing surprised her anymore. Evelyn stared at the screen. No emojis, no apology. Like he was canceling a business lunch, not ditching his wife, but she already knew the truth. Eric, the investigator, had sent her photos earlier that day. Julian seated at their favorite Italian restaurant across from Sierra Lane. The influencer with plumped lips and pretend innocence. The same place Julian once took Evelyn to celebrate their first anniversary. Her grip on the phone tightened. Rage flared. But instead of screaming, she rose, adjusted her dress, and stepped into the limo like a queen cloaked in midnight steel. She stepped out of the car, camera flashes flickering, the red carpet buzzing beneath her heels. Eyes followed her. Whispers trailed behind her. Admiration, curiosity, envy. Evelyn offered nothing but a calm, distant smile, meant for no one. Inside, jazz filled the grand hall, champagne sparkled in crystal flutes, and everything glowed golden. Evelyn drifted past the crowds like a silent storm wrapped in velvet. She wasn't looking for Julian. She wasn't waiting for anything anymore. "Evelyn!" His voice found her. Nathan, dressed in a classic black tuxedo, standing a few steps away, his expression unreadable, but steady. "You came alone?" he asked. No pity, no judgment. She nodded. "Apparently so." Nathan didn't press. He simply held out his hand. "Then may I borrow you for a dance? Not because I want to be seen with you, but because I see you." Time seemed to slow as her fingers slid into his. On the dance floor, beneath golden lights and a melancholy saxophone, two people who barely knew each other moved as if they always had. "You're always half a beat ahead," Nathan murmured. "I've spent too long dancing to music that wasn't mine," she replied, her voice nearly brushing the air between them. She didn't know if it was the champagne or the way he looked at her, but when his hand rested gently on the small of her back, it wasn't lust she felt. It was something rarer. Respect. After the second song, Nathan led her out to the balcony. The night air swept through the layers of her dress, cool but not cold. For the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. "Evelyn," Nathan said softly, "I don't know what's happening in your life, and you don't have to tell me. But if you ever need to breathe, just breathe, you can come to me." No promises, no declarations, just presence. So real it nearly broke her. "Maybe. I'll need that sooner than I thought," she whispered. And when they touched, it wasn't hunger, it wasn't desperation. It was the slow unraveling of two people who'd held themselves together for too long. That night, Evelyn didn't go home. She didn't check her phone. She didn't wonder if Julian had called. For the first time in forever, she slept in arms that didn't need to be earned. Only held. When the first light of morning slipped through Nathan's penthouse windows, Evelyn woke in his arms, quiet, warm, and unfamiliar in a way that made her shiver. Not from fear, but from peace, a feeling she hadn't known in years. She couldn't remember the last time she woke up beside a man and didn't feel panicked. No pretending to be asleep to avoid cold conversations. No curling away from the growing space between two bodies. Last night when Nathan kissed her, he wasn't in a rush. His touch wasn't possessive or invasive. It was gentle, as if he were asking permission from every fractured part of her to simply stay. She'd long believed no one really saw her, no one patient enough to reach the bruised places behind her polished mask. Until last night. She remembered every movement, every quiet breath. She remembered the way Nathan placed his hand over her heart, not to arouse, but to feel it, as if he wanted to sync with the rhythm that had been strangled by silence for so long. It wasn't just crossing a line, it was the first time she let someone enter her, in every sense of the word. And that morning, as she slipped into her silk robe, Evelyn didn't feel ashamed. She felt free. 2 weeks later that night, when Evelyn held the pregnancy test showing 2 unmistakable lines, the third test still showed 2 lines. Evelyn stood in the bathroom, fluorescent light casting cold shadows on her face. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper, something awakening. She was pregnant, and she knew without a doubt it was Nathan's. No guessing, no wondering, just one night, one truth, and it had taken root inside her. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach. There was no visible sign yet, but she already knew. This would change everything. She didn't call Nathan, didn't text, not because she wanted to keep it from him, but because this wasn't a gift she was ready to share. Not yet. Not while her husband still lived under the illusion that he held control. Julian came home on a Tuesday afternoon, eyes sunken, tie loose, the faint smell of whiskey clinging to his shirt. Evelyn sat on the sofa, calm, one hand resting gently on her abdomen. She didn't say a word, but her silence unsettled him. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice unsure. "I have something to tell you." Her voice was quiet but steady. He sat across from her, fingers clasped, eyes waiting, nervous. She reached into her purse and pulled out a sonogram. "I'm pregnant." The room went still. Julian's eyes widened. He froze. Are you sure?" 3 tests, 2 doctor visits. "Very sure." He stood pacing. We're having a baby?" Evelyn tilted her head, almost amused. Then she met his eyes and nodded slowly. "Maybe." Just one word. But it hit Julian like a wrecking ball. From that day on, Evelyn changed. She didn't argue. She didn't check his phone. She didn't demand anything. She was silent, and that silence destroyed him. Julian started skipping dinners with Sierra. He avoided mirrors. He spiraled, watching his world unravel, without knowing which thread had been pulled. "Are you sure? It's mine?" he asked once, voice shaking. Evelyn turned to him, not angry, not surprised. She smiled, thin, sharp, deadly. "What do you think?" One night, Evelyn stood by the window, hand on her stomach. The baby wasn't even visible yet, but to her, it was everything. It wasn't a trap. It was rebirth. She hadn't lied. She just didn't tell the whole truth. Because now Evelyn Hart wasn't surviving anymore. She was scripting her own story. Evelyn had always believed that truth was the sharpest weapon, but only when wielded at the right time. She didn't explode. She didn't scream. She watched every word, every move Julian made after hearing she was pregnant. What surprised her wasn't his guilt. It was his fear. He was afraid of losing what he still foolishly believed he possessed. Her. Over the next 2 weeks, Evelyn gathered everything. Bank transfers, photos, internal emails. The kind of evidence only a panicked man leaves behind. Nathan still didn't know. But every day at the office, he watched her with that quiet, distant gaze. Like he could feel something growing between them. Something real, but still unspoken. Then on a quiet Monday morning, Evelyn picked up the phone. Her voice was light, but her words were knives. "I'd like to schedule a 3-person meeting. Nathan, Julian, myself. I'm ready." The conference room on the 21st floor of Morgan & Lee law firm was brightly lit, silent to the point where you could hear the ticking of the clock. Julian walked in, still dressed in a tailored Armani suit, but the life in his eyes was gone. A few strands of hair drooped over his forehead, his jaw was rough with stubble, and his eyes looked as if he had just crawled out of a nightmare he couldn't remember. He stopped when he saw Evelyn. She was already seated, back straight, poised in an ash-gray silk dress, her hair swept into a loose bun. Her face was calm, composed, but her eyes, like shards of glass on fire, were locked onto him without blinking. Next to her stood Nathan Cole, black suit, matching tie, expression cool and sharp. He didn't need to touch her or say a word. His very presence declared something unmistakable. Evelyn was no longer alone. "Sit down," Evelyn said quietly. "We have a lot to talk about." Julian sat reluctantly. Attorney Schuyler opened the file in front of him. "I'll begin today's meeting with evidence verified by an independent auditing firm." But Evelyn didn't wait for him to continue. She turned her laptop toward Julian. The large wall screen lit up. A stream of photos appeared. Julian and Sierra Lane at a resort in Maldives, then Paris, then Florence. Flight tickets, receipts from 5-star hotels. bank transfers from the company's external relations fund. Every detail matched. Finally, a still from Sierra's live stream, wearing a Patek Philippe watch worth $42,000. A client gift, Julian had claimed, now on her wrist. Julian turned pale, his fists clenched. "You hired someone to follow me?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "No, I hired someone to protect me." Nathan remained still, but his gaze on Julian didn't waver. Steady, intense, not angry, not mocking. A warning. "She stayed silent long enough," Nathan said, voice deep and firm. Julian narrowed his eyes. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. "I get it now. You two, the gala night, right? Must have been memorable." Evelyn said nothing. She placed another file on the table, a printed copy of Julian's anonymous wire transfers to Sierra, traced back to internal company accounts. "I've sent this to the board," she said, tone light and effortless, like presenting a project timeline, "and to the state audit. Evelyn, I'm sorry, I know I was wrong. I can fix it. I'll cut ties with Sierra. We can start over." For the first time, Evelyn laughed, soft, but cold as steel. "You still think this is a marital spat?" She stood. The light caught her silver bracelet, casting a sharp gleam like a blade. "No, Julian, this is the ending." Julian collapsed into the chair. Sweat glistened on his temples. His hands trembled, lips stuttering with no words. Everything he had once controlled, Evelyn, the company, the image of the perfect man, was crumbling around him. Evelyn calmly pulled out a brown envelope. She placed it before him. "Preliminary blood work, not a paternity test, but enough for you to understand what really matters." She stepped closer. This time she leaned down and looked him straight in the eye. "The baby isn't yours and never was. Never." Julian leaned back, face ashen. He didn't cry. The pain had gone beyond that. For the first time, Julian Ward understood. All the power, the lies, the ego, none of it could save him from losing the one woman who had ever given him a chance to be forgiven. Only then did Nathan move. He stepped forward and placed a hand gently on Evelyn's shoulder, steady and solid. Evelyn didn't look at him. She didn't need to, because she knew. She was free. She walked out of the room, back straight, slow steps, unshaken pride. Nathan followed silently. Julian remained where he was, alone, and finally, broken. And this time, no one was coming to save him. Just 3 weeks after the final confrontation, the name Julian Ward quietly disappeared from Cole Media's leadership boards. At first, it was subtle. Then, during a company meeting, the chairman made a curt announcement. "Mr. Julian Ward will be stepping down from all positions due to personal and financial matters." A few staff members exchanged glances. Some looked surprised, others relieved. But the real devastation happened outside corporate lights. The tax authority launched an investigation. Julian's personal accounts were frozen. Suspicious expenses from the past 2 years resurfaced. Transactions he once thought he'd buried under polished paperwork and charm. Friends stopped answering his calls. Business partners who once toasted him at rooftop galas now responded with silence, as if they never knew him. And Sierra Lane, his living doll, once his trophy, went on Instagram tearfully declaring, "I didn't know he had a wife. I'm a victim." Just days later, she was spotted on a beach in Ibiza, hand in hand with a famous young DJ. No goodbyes. Just gone. Julian now lived alone in his high-rise apartment, without a housekeeper, without a schedule. The wine rack emptied, his inbox dried up, messages sent, no replies, no read marks. Each morning he sat in silence and staring at the black screen of his TV, hair messy, wrinkled shirt, eyes dull. The man who once walked in power now sat in stillness, cloaked in dust and disgrace. No one visited, no one needed him, and worse, no one feared him anymore. Julian Ward, once the golden boy of finance, became a whispered warning, a cautionary tale of a man who never knew when to stop until everything collapsed. No prison, no public scandal, just erased from the game, quietly, brutally, and beyond return. Evelyn didn't cry the night Julian fell apart. She didn't smile either. She simply stood by her window, hand resting gently on her stomach, where a life was quietly growing, and exhaled slowly because, finally, she had chosen herself. For years, she had tried to save a man who never wanted saving. She had swallowed rage, silenced tears, played the role of the ideal wife to preserve a marriage that existed only in appearance. But for the first time in years, Evelyn felt unafraid, because she knew she wasn't alone. Nathan didn't offer grand promises. He didn't make sweeping vows or try to make it up to her. He simply showed up. Each morning he brewed her tea, rested a hand on her belly as if listening to something sacred beyond words. Each evening he left work to walk beside her, slow, quiet, as if the whole world was learning to begin again with them. That afternoon it rained lightly. No roses, no string quartet, no fancy restaurant. Just a quiet cafe in the park Evelyn visited every weekend. A corner table by the window, a cup of warm herbal tea, and Nathan, with slightly trembling hands, pulled a dark velvet box from his coat pocket. The ring inside didn't sparkle, no diamonds, just a slim silver band engraved with the words, "You are enough." Evelyn didn't speak right away, not out of surprise, but because her heart had never felt so steady. No big wedding? No forever promises, Nathan said, eyes fixed on hers. I just want you to know, whether you choose me or not, you deserve to be loved, to be real, to be free. Her fingers gently wrapped around his, and in that quiet moment, Evelyn felt her entire past begin to fall away, not as weight, but as the journey that had brought her here. I do, she whispered. For the first time in her life, she felt worthy of being loved. There was no grand celebration, just a small ceremony by the sea. No photographers, no ball gown, just waves, a few close friends, and vows that didn't need to be written down. Evelyn didn't wear white. She chose a simple cream silk dress. Nathan wore no tie. But in his eyes, as he watched her walk toward him, was a truth deeper than anything she had ever known. In the golden light of sunset, they stood side by side, not to impress the world, but to begin again, with truth, with trust, with two souls that had once been broken, but still brave enough to love again and love better. The ceremony took place in a seaside villa. Bougainvillea petals danced in the wind. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting a golden glow on every step Evelyn took. She walked down the aisle to the soft sound of piano, holding a bouquet of lavender, her hair loose, her smile calm, not because she was marrying the perfect man, but because she was marrying a new life. The 500 guests were carefully chosen. No judgment, no prying, just people who came to celebrate two hearts that had been broken and had finally found each other. Nathan waited beneath the floral arch, and in his eyes there was only her. Evelyn knew that look was what she had longed for her entire youth. But even fairy tales can attract the shadows of the past. Just as the officiant asked, "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." A voice rang out from the back. "She's lying. That's my child. My child." The ceremony fell silent. All eyes turned. Julian, wrinkled shirt, bloodshot eyes, stumbling forward like he'd escaped a nightmare. He no longer looked like a CEO, nor a charming gentleman, just a ghost who refused to stay buried. Evelyn didn't flinch. She had expected this, and she was ready. She stepped toward the podium, took the microphone in hand. Her voice was clear, steady. "Everyone, if today's celebration has been interrupted, allow me to end it properly." She took a small folder from Nathan, held it up. "This is an official DNA test. The child I'm carrying shares no biological connection with Julian Ward." She turned, met Julian's stunned, pale face. "You lied. You cheated. You manipulated me for years. You didn't just destroy a marriage, you tried to destroy me. But today, in front of 500 witnesses, I choose truth. I choose freedom. And I choose a love that doesn't require me to become someone else." Applause erupted. Loud, unapologetic, growing stronger. Julian moved forward, but two security guards blocked him. A guest whispered, "Leave, it's over." He resisted, but this time, no one stood by him. He was escorted out the gate, surrounded by mocking eyes and quiet contempt. And when the gate shut behind him, Julian Ward officially became a stain erased from Evelyn's life. Evelyn returned to the altar, unshaken. Nathan opened his arms, his eyes steady, filled only with trust. They exchanged vows, not grand, not dramatic, just honest. "I won't promise it'll be easy, but I promise I'll never abandon myself again. And you won't have to pretend to be anyone else. We'll just be us, together." The sun dipped behind the trees, casting a warm blessing across the grass. Music played, and Evelyn smiled. Like the past had never had the power to break her. The wedding ended in applause, golden light, and quiet laughter. But to Evelyn, it wasn't just a ceremony. It was the final door closing on the past, allowing her to truly walk into a new chapter, on her own terms. The late-night sea breeze always carried a scent of its own. Salty, clean, like the world itself was exhaling in peace. Evelyn stood still on the balcony of their seaside cottage. Her hand rested gently on her stomach, where new life was growing, wrapped in a peace she once believed she would never know. Nathan walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her. No words, just warmth. "What do you see?" he asked softly. She paused, eyes fixed on the ocean. "I see a woman who once broke, who once believed being strong meant staying silent, who thought love meant enduring pain," she said. "But in the end, she learned to love herself first." Nathan held her closer. Evelyn turned to look at him, her eyes free of shadows. There was only clarity, the kind that comes from walking through darkness and choosing to step into the light. She smiled. Not because she had beaten Julian, not because she'd exposed the lies, but because, for the first time, her life was truly hers. No more compromises, no more masks, no one left to prove anything to. Under the still moonlight, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Sometimes the most beautiful revenge is living a life so honest they can't bear to look you in the eye."